In June 2008, a Maltese national was kidnapped in Nigeria. A sizable number of lawyers were striving to obtain his release. This included a number of Nigerian lawyers who had read for a postgraduate degree here in Malta. Each year, a number of Malta-trained legal specialists are sent out to all parts of the globe. For the most part, these are lawyers who go on to hold prestigious positions in their home countries and international organizations only a few years after having completed their studies in Malta. As you walk through the main gate of the University of Malta, on the left-hand side, you will find the International Institute of Maritime Law, better known as IMLI, an area that exudes tranquility in the midst of the hustle and bustle of the university campus. Although technically IMLI is sited on campus, the institute was established under the auspices of the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, a specialized agency of the United Nations. IMLI is funded by overseas benefactors hailing from the maritime industry and has a pivotal role to play in the IMO's maritime strategy. Let's hear more about this from the IMO's Secretary General, who was recently in Malta to inaugurate IMLI's new academic year.
IMO is the United Nations specialized agency responsible for the regulation of shipping from the safety, security and environmental points of view. We are a regulatory body. We discuss, develop, adopt international standards which find their way by means of international conventions. This is where our work comes to an end.
IMLI trains lawyers to eventually assist their respective governments in transposing international maritime laws into their domestic legislation, thus ensuring worldwide harmonization and implementation.
In preparing this expertise, plays an indispensable role and contributes immensely to the success of IMO.
But how did this institute come to be? Professor David Attard, the Director General of IMLI, shares this interesting story.
In
1988, I was Special Advisor to the Secretary General of the IMO. And at the time, the government had wished to explore the possibility of developing Malta as an international maritime register. Dr. Joe Fenech, God rest his soul, was the individual behind this initiative. He had asked me how we could go about raising our international profile. Joe, you need to have the backing of the IMO in this, I had said, because I knew that it could be a potential stumbling block. IMO is the International Maritime Organization. Dr. Fenech had said, fine, what next? And I replied, look, in the coming days, the Secretary General, Dr. Srivastava, will be visiting Malta. He's an Indian national and I will try to organize a meeting. Joe Fenech was an enterprising individual. He said, yes, sure, let's take him out to dinner.
At the time, about 40 international fishing and shipping conventions existed. A typical case study that may have been discussed could have included, for example, a scenario contemplating what happens when a vessel carrying hazardous cargo is involved in an accident that has repercussions on another country, even when this vessel would be sailing in international waters. Other related questions could have included what regulations could be applied to what is dumped at sea. The treaties had been signed, but developing countries did not have the technical expertise to codify and implement them. They were availing themselves of consultants subsidized by the Norwegian government.
I told him, instead of retaining the current system of having visiting consultants for 3 months or so, and having no continuity when they leave, why don't we train lawyers coming from these countries? So that, first of all, they would safeguard their country's interests, and secondly, they would be capable of implementing these treaties. And Srivastava turned to Dr. Fenech and said, look, if your government is prepared to offer premises here, I am willing to set up this kind of institute in Malta. Dr. Fenech, with his typical enthusiasm, managed to have the premises completed in good time. In such good time, in fact, that it would be another 6 months before IMO were ready to move in.
20 years later, Professor Wiswall, who is a visiting lecturer at IMLI, has this to say.
IMLI is an institution which, if it had not been founded when it was, when there was considerable doubt expressed in some quarters about the need for it, and certainly about the location in Malta, would definitely have been founded by now, out of necessity.
From time immemorial, Malta's history has been intrinsically linked to the sea. Professor Attard refers to the sea as being the single most consistent element that shaped Malta's destiny, and Arvid Pardo raised it to new heights. Pardo was Malta's ambassador to the United Nations in 1967. His proposal on behalf of Malta was that the seabed, beyond territorial waters, constitutes part of the common heritage of mankind.
It was only 3 years after independence, and the change Malta was proposing to maritime law was a radical one. I am proud to say that at university a monument was erected to commemorate Pardo's achievements, because really everyone in legal circles acknowledges him as being the father of international maritime law.
At the time, the idea was a groundbreaking one, as was years later the proposal that climate change is a common concern for mankind. That idea too originated in Malta, the brainchild this time of Professor David Attard. Let's go back to IMLI and briefly chat with the students, all graduates and lawyers in their own right.
In all cases, very young people. Indeed, they have to have already achieved not only a law degree, but to be positioned in practice either with a maritime law firm or in a branch of their government that is concerned with maritime affairs, or in the naval forces, Coast Guard forces, or in perhaps merchant shipping companies. So they're already established lawyers, and that's what we need to work with. And every student that is with us now, and this has been so for many years, is here on merit, and they tend in this field in their country to be the brightest of the bright. They are, in fact, the brightest of the bright.
My department, I work in the Attorney General's department in Sri Lanka, and they were offered a scholarship. One of us was offered a scholarship, and I was selected as a result.
I like it very much. In fact, it gives an international perspective to my purpose, and not only English perspective. So it's very, I must say, benefit for my future work in this field.
Well, I come from the Commonwealth of Dominica. This scholarship was advertised. I do work in the Attorney General's chambers, and it was circulated within the chambers, and I expressed an interest with my government, and I was selected.
I've always been fascinated by maritime law. The sea has always attracted me, and within the coming decades there'll be an increase in maritime trade all over the world, and there's also a shortage of maritime lawyers in developing countries, and in India as well. There's a great shortage of maritime lawyers. So I thought a degree from IMLI would stand me in good stead.
I think this is a remarkable